Hello and welcome to the vlog on the bog. And for the benefit of my American viewers and perhaps those in other countries as well, I should just quickly define that bog is British slang for toilet. So the vlog on the bog is a video all about the different types of toilet you can get on a narrowboat. And believe it or not, this is actually a much requested video. People have been saying, what do you do about your black water, as it's called? All your number ones and number twos, what do you do with them? The answer is that, like everything else on a narrowboat, you have to be pretty much self-sufficient. Just in the way that you've got a large tank of water at the front of the boat, and you've got self-contained electricity generation, whether from the engine or generator or solar panels, so you have to be self-contained about your poo and wee. You can't just dump it out into the canal. This is not a sea-going boat. As I understand it, sea boats just open a valve and it all gets dumped out into the oceans. You can't do that on the canal. It is prohibited. And apart from anything else, remember, there is no real flow of water on the canal. There's no tide, there's no current. The water is by and large static. So if you did dump your poo out, it's just going to bob about the side of your boat until eventually enough people have opened the locks further down the canal to move the flow of water a bit, in which case your poo is going to go and bob against next door's boat and you'll get the stuff from further. It's just not a thing. You don't dump your black tank into the canal. What you have to do is store your poo and your wee on the boat in some form or another until you get to one of the various sanitary stations around the canal network where you can empty it. And the places you can do that depends slightly on the type of toilet you have. There are, I suppose, two main types and a third type that is coming up fast in popularity. You've got the cassette toilet, you've got the pump out toilet, and then the new kid on the block, which seems to be very popular with those who've got it, is the composting toilet. Let us start with what I've got here on my boat, and that is a cassette type. This is my Thetford CS200 cassette toilet, complete with electric flush, the supply for which the water comes from the main boat tank. As you can see, it pretty much looks like a normal toilet. You've got a lid here which you lift up, revealing the seat and the bowl, and down there is where all your gubbins goes. The only thing you have to note is that when you want to use the loo, you have to push this lever to the side, and that opens a plastic flap there that opens the hole up so that your number ones and number twos go down into the storage cassette, which is stored underneath the toilet. When you're done, a quick press on this button here squirts some water around the bowl, which also goes down the hole, and then you press the lever again and shut it, and that keeps any nasty nifs from coming up into the bathroom. You can see underneath it's quite deep, and it's in there that the storage cassette is for all the poo and wee. The way these are designed is that they sit flush against a bulkhead, as you can see there, so that when you come to the other side, an access panel is always installed, and you open up that panel, and there's the cassette, which you can then pull out and empty. This is what a typical cassette looks like. Under here is where the hole is that everything dropped into from the toilet bowl. That knob, when that turns, it's opening a flap in there. That's what you're operating when you push that lever that I showed you. That's a little vent thing, something to do with smells and escaping gases from all the fermenting solids inside there. It's through this tube that you actually empty the cassette. I'll show you that in a second. And as you can see, there are handles at either end so that you can carry the cassette and also lift it out from wherever you've got it stored. Meanwhile, this little button here becomes very important when you're actually emptying the cassette, and I'll come back to that in a second. Newer cassettes now come with little wheels at the bottom because, holding 17 litres, they are heavy to lug about. An inbuilt handle also unfurls from the box, and you can then wheel it along the towpath and pretend you're going on holiday instead of carting your outpourings to the disposal point. This is what an Elsan point looks like. This is at Norton Junction. Hidden behind the brickwork is a hinged metal cover with two handles which you swing open to reveal the basin beneath into which you pour the waste. There's a tap so you can rinse your cassette and make sure the Elsan is left clean for the next person, which doesn't always happen. Here's the process. Approach the Elsan and open the metal flaps. Holding the cassette upwards, push up the dump pipe and unscrew the cap. Do not breathe in. Now, carefully, using the handles, tilt the cassette so it's pointing right down into the waste unit and press the little yellow button I mentioned earlier. Don't do this until the cassette is pointing down, otherwise you'll get waste dribbling out of it onto your hand. It's a vent which lets air in to help release the waste without any glugging and splashing. When it's empty, bring the cassette back up and use the hose pipe to squirt in a load of water. Normally, the hoses are a bit longer than this one, but it's a bit rubbish here and quite awkward. Give the cassette a little shake and empty again. You'll probably do this a couple of times to make sure every last bit has been washed out and rinsed. If you want, you can add antibacterial rinses and such like, but they're not provided, just bring your own. Screw the dump pipe lid back on tightly so that nothing leaks when you're using it again, and use the hose to give the Elsan point a rinse. There's often a flush handle, like on a domestic toilet, but not here, I don't know why. Close the lids, else it'll stink all around, and take your cassette back to the boat. So that is the cassette toilet. The downsides of it are that it has relatively limited capacity. You're going to have to be emptying it every few days. There's also the simple nastiness of carrying a bucket of your own poo and wee around up the towpath, not to mention the actual emptying it portion where you kind of have to stand as far back as you can and clench your nose a bit, and it's all a bit icky really, and many people just don't want to have anything to do with that. On the upside, the cassette toilet is relatively inexpensive, it's very easy to install into any narrowboat, and you have the flexibility of the cassettes. You can buy as many as you want, for example, to have as much capacity as you want, provided you can store them somewhere on the boat. But also, because you only have to take the cassette out to empty it, if the boat for any reason is incapacitated, whether it's due to engine failure or in winter the boat getting iced in, doesn't matter. You just take the cassette out and walk up the towpath and you can still empty it. Those people who rely on a fixed tank in the boat, which is the pump out, well, if you can't move the boat, you've got a problem. So let's talk about the pump out next. First of all, let me describe the pump out arrangement. You have the normal toilet bowl and flush facility in the bathroom, and the waste goes down a pipe off to a holding tank somewhere. If you are lying in your bed at night, and perhaps the boat's rocking a little in the wind, and you're hearing a little gentle splish, splosh, and you think, oh, that's so sweet, that's the sound of the canal. If you've got a pump out toilet, it's probably not the canal you're hearing, because generally the preferred location for the pump out holding tank is under the bed, because it's a good decent bit of space to put a large capacity tank. So that splish splosh, not the water outside, it's the accumulated poo and wee of you and your guests for however many weeks it is since you last emptied the tank. It kind of takes the shine off the pump out when you know that you're sleeping above the holding tank. But the advantage of it is that because you've got a whacking great holding tank and all the stuff just gets flushed into it, you go, well, weeks before you actually have to empty it. And with the emptying, you don't take the tank out. There's a mechanism for putting a huge vacuum pump into a socket on the side of the boat, and then machines just vacuum everything out of the storage tank and into a bigger holding tank on the bank of the canal or in the marina or wherever it is you've taken for the pump out. And that is the other slight disadvantage of the pump out, is that you have to take the whole boat to a pump out station. Mostly they're found in marinas, wharves. There are some self pump outs where you have to do the mucking about with the hoses instead of the marina staff, and they're found at some of the Canal and River Trust LSAN points, but as far as I know they're nothing like as widespread as the Cassette emptying points. The other big downside is you will have to pay for it, whereas LSAN Cassette emptying points are free, they're provided for as part of your license fee. With a pump out, you'll probably be paying £15 to £20 a time, in no small part because you're probably going into a marina to have it pumped out, and they charge. But even the Canal and River Trust, you have to buy, I think it is some sort of tokens in order to operate the machines, and typically £15 to £20 is about right. There are some people who will say, that's fine, I don't mind paying that every 1 or 2 months because it means I don't have to muck about with cassettes and it's a long time between emptying. You might think that because you're not physically emptying a cassette, you don't get the nasty whiffs, but let me tell you this. When I've stood downwind of somebody doing a pump out on their boat, it is just the most, indescribably horrible thing you will ever smell. It doesn't matter how much they jam the vacuum pumps into the pipe on the outside of the boat, somehow the whiff gets out. And if you've got a couple of months of accumulated, stuff, it's indescribably horrible. I learned that lesson at Yelvertoft, where whoever designed the marina rather ingeniously put the office downwind of the pump out pontoon, and if someone was doing a pump out when you went to the office, words fail me. They truly fail me for how stinky it was. So if you think that having a pump out you're going to get away with dealing with the smells, you so are not. At least on every pump out I've ever seen, and that was on several different boats. It was just horrid. But you have the convenience of only doing it every 1 or 2 months. The other major downside to a pump out is that rarely, but it does happen, after a long while your tank can potentially leak. Now just imagine the horror, if you will, of a substantial many litres of accumulated waste starting to leak under the bed in your boat. It just doesn't bear thinking about, but it does occasionally happen. Or more often, what you have in the pipework between the toilet and the tank is a macerating pump. That is to say, a pump that not only pulls everything from the toilet to the tank, but also chews it up, particularly to sort of get its way through the toilet paper. It chews everything up and makes it into more of a liquid waste. And occasionally those pumps fail. And if those pumps fail, you've basically got to slap on your marigolds and get in there and sort it out. So while a pump out is working, it's probably a great thing. If there is ever any problem with it, oh my, you are really not going to want to deal with that. So pros and cons. That's the pump out. Let's turn our attention to the third and probably final way of having a toilet on a boat, and that is the composting loo. For this, many thanks to the lovely Wobbly Boater and his wife, who let me join them, their dog and 2 cats to have a look at their composting setup, which they really like. This is the loo. Looks much like any other, but when you peer inside, it's clear the solids get separated from the liquids. And yes, gents, this means you must sit down to pee. The urine goes off down a pipe to a portable liquids tank. As you sit, this flap moves aside to let your poo drop straight down. Because of that, there's no flush, which saves water, important on a boat. Lifting the top up shows where it goes, basically into a bucket, which normally you'd have a bin bag wrapped over, but we took it off for this shot. Smells are removed by a permanently running 12-volt fan. It draws a minute current from the batteries, but you do need to be aware of it. The pong gets vented up a pipe and out of the roof. And here's how you empty it. Lift the whole seat and tie up the plastic bag in the bucket. Then take a second bag, pop it over the top of the first, and so double wrap the excrement. This can now be stored on the boat for a further few months to break down, or you can actually dump it as is into the Canal and River Trust waste bins, as the Wobbly Boater explains.
The CRT recommend or prefer that you put the double bag it or bag it up and put it into the garbage. There have been people who've buried it, and if you do have a proper garden with a composting heap and you've got the space to store it and compost it, that's even better still. As far as the urine, we always pour ours down an L-sand. We don't use the drains. It can, I guess, in a pinch be used. You can pour it down a regular toilet because it's just urine. There's nothing in it, there's no paper, nothing else. It's just liquid going down the toilet, so it's not going to overload your system.
Resetting the loo just involves a few handfuls of stuff like this, basic wood shavings which you can buy from pet shops. Stick a new bag into the bin, add some sawdust, spread it around a bit, and you're ready to pop the bin back into the loo and use it.
The initial expense is about £600, but if you're going from a pump out, when you consider how much it costs you to pump out on a regular basis, then over the course of 12 months to 2 years you've paid for it. So I wouldn't sort of call it expensive, no, not really. You're not using blue ever, and it's the convenience outweighs the expense.
It is often said that if you put any two random narrowboaters together, within no more than 5 minutes they will start discussing the relative merits of different toilet types, so obsessed are boaters with the disposal of their bowel movements. It used to just be the cassette versus the pump out, but in recent years the composting toilet has definitely started to make headway. Now, which one is right for you, only you can decide, and quite possibly only after using all three and then making your decision. And it may simply be that you get whatever is on the boat that you buy, and you learn to live with and maybe even love that one. But there are options available. I hope the video was useful to you. Thank you very much for watching. Any questions, drop them down below. I will do my best to answer. Cheers now. Bye-bye.